What would that decision be, and please elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, and it's something fairly controversial. It was the decision to migrate the IT department over to the city clerk's office. And although it was very contentious at the time, I really believe wholeheartedly in transparency in government. It is a messy situation. It can be. Making of sausage is a messy situation, but it should be fully transparent. And I think that ultimately, even though it can be difficult to operate that way, it is for the better. It is a better relationship you're establishing with the people you represent, and people should have access to information no matter what. And that is something that I'm very, very, very strong on, and very proud of, even though it was not an easy thing to do.
Thank you. Is it tacky if I just make the observation that the guy that owns the Italian restaurant was talking about making sausage?
Yes, it is
I
tacky.
hadn't thought of that. But thank you for that.
Yeah. All right, Shannon.
Shows you're paying attention, I'm not.
Yeah.
The question, what decision?
Yeah, if you had to pick a decision that best exemplifies your approach to government, what would that be?
I think it comes to the Laurel Park overlay. There was a decision between Laurel Park, the downtown code, and how basically the business community, the neighborhoods were lined up in basically conflict with each other. That came through, basically got ground through several meetings, and at the end of the day, what we came up with was the way the Laurel Park overlay was wanting to cooperate with the downtown master plan, which is administrative review. When it was clear the commission was divided, it was clear the community was divided into two camps, I was able to point out, if we do it this way and we show the path, we can actually go through a form-based code, which we're currently working on, which is now in the budget, we've hired people for. We may get to administrative review once the form-based code is done to make it easier, so everybody stops the fighting between the neighborhoods and the business community, and everybody's on a level playing field so they know exactly what can be built, what can't be built, and that way move forward. I think that's what I'm most proud of, is that basically we walked out of a meeting that was probably going to be a dividing commission, it was a 5-0 vote, and the neighborhood and the business community walked out with basically a win-win.
Thank you. All right, and this one's for Alex, whose name will appear on the general election ballot. You have not served on an elected board before, correct?
No.
Right. So, why do you think people should vote for you in that case? What would you bring to the office?
I have been involved with a lot of things in the county. I have also been extensively involved with issues with the 2050, particularly the issues of the rural people that live out east. I've studied the cattle ranching community for about 8 years now, and so I'm very aware of the importance of balancing urban and rural space. As an anthropologist, my consulting company has taken a big shift into dialogue building. And one of the things that I have discovered during this work is that sometimes the things that we're not talking about are the most important things we should be talking about. And I think that that applies to Sarasota as well. There's a lot of issues that we just keep spinning around with the same conversations that we need to look at differently, and we need to start talking about the things we're not talking about. And when we do that, I think we'll find the solutions.
Okay, thank you. Let me just pause real quickly here. Give me an idea of how many people anticipate asking questions from the floor. Just raise your hand if you think you'd be. Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure we have enough time. Yeah, this is my first time reading glasses, doing this. Let's go down the road. We'll start with Paul. What is your view of the county's policies on economic development and its performance in that realm?
I think one of the things that the county commission is to be commended for is the fact that their actions follow their philosophy, which is to welcome investment, which is to look for opportunities to diversify our economic system, which is predominantly based on tourism, seasonal residency, and the service industry. And the fact that there has been such a remarkably successful, and even though it's early, I think we can all agree there's been tremendous success. Sports tourism has been a huge part of that. I don't see how, from a philosophical standpoint, you could fault the county commission for anything with economic development. I think that what perhaps may need to be done is that from an administrative capacity, the follow-through and hitting the punch list to make sure that things are being done to execute the vision that the board agrees on is perhaps where there might need to be some work done. But I think economic development, anyone who's involved in the county government should be proud of the direction it's gone.
Thank you. Alex?
Well, I think that we should definitely be looking at ways to support local businesses that are already here instead of continuing to think that there's going to be some knight in shining armor company that's going to come in and rescue us economically. I also think that we're ignoring the potential agriculture has to be an economic engine for Sarasota County. Agriculture is the second largest economic engine for the state of Florida, and we're part of the state of Florida. And I think that we need to revisit the potential that agriculture has. Cattle ranchers have had record profits recently, and it's an important industry. It's a multilateral industry in agriculture. Also looking at local food systems. Local food systems are a billion-dollar business all across the United States, and many urban spaces are starting to develop local food systems. We should be looking more at that. It's not even something that we're talking about. Our EDC report says we want to have healthcare as one of our driving economic models. Well, healthcare should start on the front end, not on the back end. We ought to be doing things to provide health for our seniors on the front end through a local food system, through looking at ways to live that support well-being and not just looking at to address people in hospitals. So I think there's a number of economic things we can do.
Thank you. Steve?
I think that globally we are at a time of great shift. We are all kind of seeing a lot of changes happening in the world at a very quick pace. And I think in Sarasota we have gotten into a pattern of looking at building, tourism, real estate as like our key industries. We just keep looking at those over and over and over again, and they're fine and all well. But I think we do need to have a lot of economic potential outside the box of just finance that we can address, such as food, such as agriculture. These are huge economic factors that we need to invest more in. If we have plenty of food, it's not really such a grasping exercise to try to have the money to pay for it. We're growing it here by ourselves. I think our arts, as far as nonprofit arts, is a huge economic indicator. It's very, very, very strong economically, but I don't think we've come near to tapping into its full potential, not only for nonprofit arts, but in for-profit arts. We have the potential now to look at cognitive surplus and how we can create new things to be able to spread out through the internet, through the web, and touching on all these different technologies that I don't think we've become fully aware of because we're kind of set in patterns. And I think if we can expand outside of those regular patterns into the new opportunities that await us, I think we have a really just a great future ahead of us.
All right, thank you. Shannon?
Yeah, I think we need to stop grabbing onto whatever the trend of the month is and offering incentives to specific corporations. I think we need to come up with a blanket policy and expand our abating our industrial base by abating our tangible taxes and trying to basically expand our inventory base. When you start looking at the amount of light industrial properties that are around the county, there's a massive amount of property. And we also have the Port of Manatee opening up. And the Port of Tampa will be repositioning itself with a new cruise line out on the Pinellas County side of things. There's going to be a lot more pore space and a lot more opportunity for this area to get into the manufacturing side of things. I think that's probably where we need to be aiming our directions at.
All right, thanks, Pete.
It's getting to the point where businesses are formulating business plans with the assumption that they're going to get some government money to help them out. I think that when the government starts investing, quote unquote, in private business, it distorts the market. Things that would not be undertaken at all of a sudden look like, hey, that's a good idea. Then they get some money from the government, the bonuses go to the CEOs and the next in line maybe, and then it's business as usual. It really doesn't have any impact, certainly no benefit to the taxpayer. So when you talk about economic development, you need to make sure that it's not turning into welfare for the rich.
All right, thank you. All right, since the primary comes first, after this question, we'll do the closing statements. Since the primary comes first, I'll ask Paul and then Shannon how you want Republican voters to differentiate between the two of you. Paul.
I would want any voter to look at, perhaps not what I say in the forum, not what you see in the newspaper, but look at the votes that I have cast. I have been a responsible steward with the budget, I believe. I have been someone who, to my knowledge, has been on, I believe, the correct side of any economic development issue. I am here with my young family. I have a long-term plan for this community to stay in it, and my interests are not for the next 5 minutes. They're hopefully for the next 5 generations. So I would hope that they would look at that and not get stuck with the buzzword of this, the buzzword of that, and what you see on a political mailer. The job's a lot more complicated than that, and I think a sophisticated audience like that is well aware of that, but perhaps not everyone is. But I would ask you to look at the record and take your assessment that way.
All right, thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, I think there is a difference. I've never voted to raise the property millage rate. I've never voted to raise business fees, and I've been a fiscal hawk the entire time I've been on the city commission. I'm the only one that'll hold people accountable at the table. We've had issues that have come through, and I've called it out at the table, and I'm proud to be the one on the 4-to-1 side of many votes. So yeah, that voting record does matter, and I would take a good long look at it. I'd also take a look at when the city commission decided to discuss stand your ground. I was the only commissioner to stand there and completely articulate why stand your ground is a good law for the state of Florida, and I was able to articulate that very well. I think that the voting records do matter. I think there is a difference. And I also think the difference is how many people have actually reached out to neighborhoods and got the neighborhoods and the business community to actually work together rather than competing against each other for stance on where they're trying to get at.
All right, thanks. We'll give everybody 1 minute to close. We'll start at the far end of the table. I'll keep an eye on the time. Pete, you got up to 1 minute.
The United States of America is a free country. The freedom of the United States should extend to Florida and Sarasota County, should. However, mixing business and charity with government erodes our freedom. What used to be voluntary becomes compulsory and leads to disaster. I don't know any taxpayer who wants to fund the various cleanups caused by businesses, or who wants to bail them out when they blow their own bankroll and need more to fund their lavish lifestyles. Yet that is what the county has been asked to do and will be asked again. I especially don't know anyone who wants to underwrite a mess up that is projected to happen and can be avoided just by saying no. That is the solution. Say no. No to subsidies. No to bailouts. No to incentives. No to impact discounts. If a business plan requires tax money to be
All right,
profitable,
that's a minute.
it is not a business plan at all. It is welfare.
All right, thanks. Shannon, 1 minute, please.
I'm Shannon Snyder. I was raised in Sarasota County. I've served as your city commissioner. I've served as your mayor. I was voted best mayor by SRQ Magazine and a reader in a recent edition of Best. I also am proud of my service on the city commission. I did 25 years in law enforcement. I know every inch of this county and have served in every neighborhood as far as from Northport all the way to University Parkway. Sarasota County is in the middle of flux right now. If you want status quo, I'm not your candidate, but I would like to ask for your vote. If you would like to see a change that Sarasota County needs in the direction to have controlled, managed growth that's not going to saddle the taxpayer with infrastructure costs, I'd like to hear from you. If you leave here today without my cell phone number, I'll be disappointed. Also, I'd like to ask for your vote and your appreciated time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Before we get to Steve, if you want to pose a question, maybe you can start lining up at the microphones. Save a little time, please. Steve, 1 minute, please.
My name is Steve McAllister. I'm a Sarasota native. Was born in the city, raised in the county, out in Maca Valley Ranches. And I spent quite a few of my 20s and 30s of those years trying to get out of here. Came back in 2004, and I've never been more content to live in a place. And I want to be more active in what's going on here. In the last few years, I have done quite a few lifestyle experiments. One of them was living a year without the use of money, and opened me up to a new understanding of resource-based economics and how we can create a good living and economics of well-being without being subservient to things that aren't necessarily working very well for us. See on the national scale and on the global scale how the economic system is really breaking down. It's not working as well as we think that it does, and it's creating insurmountable amounts of debt and a lot of problems. And I think that if we can see outside of that box and recognize who we really are as a people, what is important to us in meeting our needs and allowing for people to reach their highest good, I think we have great capabilities. But we can't do that by continuing to do the same thing as always. And I hope you consider thinking outside the box. You can check out any writing I do every day at writeinstevemcallister.com.
All right, thanks. Alex, a minute, please.
I've lived in Sarasota for 20 years. I raised my family here. I want to be an old woman in Sarasota. I want to live in a condo downtown. I want to hang out with all of you and have a wonderful life here in Sarasota. Government is supposed to be a reflection of the values of the people. I don't think Sarasota government is that right now. Government should also serve the needs of the people. And I don't think the people feel like their needs are being served. I think as an anthropologist, what I bring to the county commission is I bring a people-centered focus, and I also bring a code of ethics that I do all of my work by, which I think a good infusion of ethics is good for governance. So that's what I think I bring. I think I bring a unique perspective and an understanding of development, because there is such a thing as development without growth. And I think that is a perspective that we really need to explore, and is another one of those topics that we're not talking about.
Thank you. Paul, 1 minute.
You know, like I said, you can go on the buzzwords that we see in the newspaper or in the forum, and we can take facts and push them to make them look like whatever you want. I would ask you to go to my webpage, paulcaragiola.com. I have a tremendous amount of support for a reason, I believe. It's because the folks who are on those pages who have endorsed me and are supporting me know the way I work. They know how serious I am about the job. I will meet with anyone. I will work with anyone. I need your vote. I need your support. Please help me to work for you by working with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, I know many of you have heard my little shtick here, but before we get to questions, I went to church on Sunday, got my sermon. So if you could just get to the questions, that would be nice, and respect the ability of other people to ask questions. First time anybody's applied for that. My mother was glad to see me too. One thing for the questioners, if you wanted to go to a specific candidates, or the whole panel, just please say so at the end of your very brief pointed question. Dan.
You saw me standing here, didn't you? My question is about road funding. Let me try to be succinct. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. About road funding. You touched on it, Tom, but I didn't really hear a good answer. Sarasota County, with all the growth that's being opened up, is facing a severe shortage and facing gridlock on roads throughout the county. There isn't the money now in the till to resolve that gridlock. How would you fund it? Would you specifically restore full funding of road impact fees, which have been cut in half by the county commission? Would you have a tough, complete fiscal neutrality policy for Sarasota 2050? Or would you let the developers continue to call the score here and keep the costs on developers low and the burden on the taxpayers and the motorists?
All right, who do you want? Who are you directing this to?
Actually, the candidates that'll appear on the ballot. Sorry, Pete.
Well, that's not very nice.
His names will appear on the ballot in the general election.
Yes.
All right. So we'll go Paul.
Yeah.
Paul,
Again,
Paul,
this morning we dealt with this very directly at the League of Cities because today, Ways and Means, there was a press release put out that said that Congress was going to relook at funding the issue with the gas tax. You know, for years and years and years, we've been paying by the gallon as opposed to by the dollar amount, so we're generating no more gas tax, even though the price of gas is higher. I'm not suggesting you pass it off to the federal government because I'm not real sweet on the idea of relying on the federal government to do much of anything. However, I think what the point is that you got to look for opportunities and get away from to tell you what's off the table. Things that are big issues like that, you got to pretty much leave everything on the table, work through it. You're not going to please everybody. If it comes down to, do you want the developers to pay for everything or pay nothing? I mean, to even polarize the issue like that does nobody any good, all right? We have to look for a holistic way to remediate these concerns. Everyone has to give a little, everyone will get a little, but we'll get through it. But these numbers are big numbers. We can find solutions for them. There are ways to do it. If it's important enough to be done, it can be done.
All right. Alex?
I do not believe that the cost of development should fall on the taxpayers at any level. So development should pay its own way, it should pay for itself. I have a piece of property that used to be on the edge of town. Now I'm in the middle of town. I live 2 blocks from a dirt road. Why is that happening? I think we really need to start looking more at the infrastructure that we have and start to solve problems like existing dirt roads, issues with River Road. We have to look at some of these things first before we just keep growing and expanding and increasing the burden on the taxpayers. I mean, we have to figure out how to do Sarasota that we already have correctly. We have to do the Sarasota that we've already created right before we just start to create a larger Sarasota and increase some of these problems that we have.
And I bet if you get elected, that road will get paved. Shannon?
Yeah, as I spoke earlier, we have probably 20 years of straightening out what's going to come our way in the next couple of years as far as the amount of traffic that we're going to inherit from the planning decisions that have been made. Make no mistake, no matter how big the pots are, no matter what discussion is, there's not enough money right now to straighten out the problems that we're going to receive in the not too distant future. Whether it's University Parkway or whether it's River Road, we are going to have to make some very tough decisions. It's not just the financing of the road. It may be the availability of, we can't do certain projects in this community, whether private or public sector, until we have the infrastructure in place. It's a much bigger conversation than just where does all the money come from, which is a very big piece of the component. But it's not just, there's going to be other questions on how much we can actually develop, because we may actually have full gridlock to the point we may not be able to get to other areas until the infrastructure is in place. And unfortunately, that will slow down growth.
All right, thank you. Charlotte?
Mine is to Commissioner Snyder and Carrier. Commissioner Snyder, you said that serving on the city commission was like herding cats. As one of those cats, how are you going, or what will you be doing differently as a county commissioner to bring consensus among the county commissioners and with the county and the cities that you don't seem to be able to do in your seat now? And that would be for the incumbent commissioners that are running for county.
All right.
That's a good question. When I said herding cats, we have different commissioners that all have different talents. Unfortunately, they're all going in a little bit different direction at different times, and there doesn't seem to be cohesiveness, especially on the budget issues or when it comes to taxes. Those issues I've had to learn to be a lot more articulate with, or actually go into deeper delves into conversations. That's something I've had to learn as a city commissioner. I realized that